You woe and believe what happened when the HOA tried to illegally seize a third of my private property for a lavish, unsanctioned party. They thought they owned my barn, my land, my life. They were wrong. In the climax of this absolute nightmare, 22 self-important committee members, including the infamous HOA president, Brenda the Bannimer Thompson, found themselves trapped inside my $10,000 square foot barn, panicking as I calmly introduced my three $2,500 pound champion Angus bulls, Thor, Loki, and Odin, to their illegal little soiree. The resulting chaos was devastating. Stay tuned, because the final revenge move didn't just get them kicked off the board. It banned them from the entire state. This is the story of how a private rancher fought the tyrannical suburban sprawl and won the hard way. Smash that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. You know you live for this drama, so don't miss a single upload of entitled neighbors getting their just desserts. Hit the notification bell so you're the first to see the next outrageous HOA meltdown. We're talking about illegal land grabs, criminal trespass, and $7,500 pounds of pure, angry farm muscle. Let's get into it. My name is Jake, and I owned a beautiful, historic $40 working cattle ranch. The iron air nestled right at the boundary of a new, aggressively managed master-planned community called Whispering Meadows. The subdivision was a recent development, creeping closer and closer, and the Whispering Meadows Homeowners Association, or WMHOA, was run by a group who thought their $400 a monthly fee bought them dominion over the entire county. Our initial interaction was minor, almost laughable. The WMHOA covenants stated that no resident could keep livestock. A reasonable rule for $1 for acre lots, but entirely irrelevant to my protected agricultural land. However, Brenda Thompson, the WMHOA president, a woman whose entire personality seemed molded from the finest blend of entitlement and cheap polyester, decided my perfectly maintained award-winning ranch was an aesthetic blight on their luxury entrance. The first offense. A registered letter demanding I remove the unsightly livestock and deconstruct the odor-producing barn. I responded with a certified copy of my $150-year-old deed, the county's right to farm ordinance, and a 2-word legal note, "See a lawyer." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Brenda's pettiness escalated to weekly complaints to the county about noise pollution from my prize bull. Thor, whose bellow she described as a primeval, aggressive roar that psychologically torments the children, ignored them. Then, they tried to enforce a no commercial vehicle parking rule, claiming my $40-foot cattle trailer, parked on my private access road within my property line, violated their sightlines. It was a clear, calculated campaign of harassment designed to force me to sell to their developer buddies. But the conflict remained a paper war until the day I left for a $72-hour cattle auction out of state. I had a clear protocol for my ranch hand, Mark, who lived 5 miles away: check the animals, feed water, and wait for my return. The fateful mistake was that I did not physically lock the main barn, a massive antique structure I used for feeding and storing hay bales, opting instead for a simple latch since only Mark ever entered it. 3 hours into my drive, Brenda Thompson saw her opportunity. She somehow convinced the rest of the board that my ranch, specifically my barn, was an abandoned eyesore, and worse, a public safety hazard due to the hay and the theoretical presence of a mouse, citing a completely fabricated and non-existent clause about emergency structural inspection and temporary occupation of adjacent lots for community benefit. She unilaterally voted to seize the barn for a board appreciation and fundraiser gala scheduled for that very Saturday night, right when I was supposed to be in transit home. They didn't just trespass. They put a laminated, official-looking WMHOA Notice of Temporary Seizure sign on the main gate. The WMHOA was preparing to host 200 people in my barn, $100 feet from my house, using my private electrical supply, and they were charging $200 a plate to do it. Mark showed up the next morning, saw the vans, the caterers, and the $20-foot banner reading Whispering Meadows Gala, a night in the country, and immediately called me, his voice shaking with disbelief. I was $700 miles away, stuck in a hotel, and my private property had been stolen by a group of suburban tyrants. The moment Mark called, I felt a cold dread turn into white-hot fury. Brenda wasn't just having a party. She was making a declaration of war, using my private property as a symbol of her HOA's power to dominate the rural landscape. My first call was to my lawyer, who was incredulous. Criminal trespass, conversion of property, commercial negligence, civil conspiracy. The damages could be astronomical, Jake, but to stop them tonight. That's the challenge. He advised an immediate cease and desist, threatening massive fines. I faxed the letter, a $10-page legal thermonuclear bomb, directly to Brenda's office, the HOA's registered agent, and every board member. Their response? A text message from Brenda herself. We are aware of your letter. Due to the high-dollar nature of this charity event, we consider it an emergency situation that nullifies any frivolous legal claims. This is for the community. I see you Monday, Jake. She was mocking me, daring me. I instructed Mark to wait. I drove $700 miles straight through, fueled by pure righteous rage, arriving back at the ranch at $830 p.m., $30 minutes after the gala had officially started. The sight was surreal. My rustic barn, lit up by rented chandeliers, valet parking spilling out onto my private driveway, a live band, and 200 entitled individuals milling around, sipping champagne in my hay-scented storage space. The WMHOA had even draped the main gate with white linen and a velvet rope. The arrogance was breathtaking. I parked my diesel pickup behind a massive pile of cedar fence posts I was storing out of sight. I knew that shutting down the party with the police would take hours, a legal injunction days. And the sight of Brenda's smug face enjoying her triumph was simply too much to bear. I needed an immediate, visceral, irreversible action that spoke the language Brenda Thompson clearly understood. Consequence. I walked past the velvet rope, my boots crunching on the gravel, completely ignored by the flustered young man hired to take tickets. I strolled over to the fence separating the main barn from the bull pasture, a heavy-duty steel pipe fence that ran 200 feet long. Mark had already ensured the fence was electrified, standard $10,000 volt deterrent, and the gate was secured with a double chain. I found Mark waiting near the back corner, hiding behind a tractor shed. He just pointed. They moved all the hay. They set up the VIP lounge right where Thor likes to sleep. And Jake. They locked the main doors from the inside. That detail was the key. They had sealed themselves in my building, effectively barricading themselves inside a private dwelling, a felony offense in this state, and trapping themselves with their own hubris. I told Mark to wait and watch, walked back to my truck, put on my heavy leather gloves, and retrieved my specialized $5-foot post hole digger, the perfect tool for leverage. I went to the gate separating the bull pasture from the main access, not the fence to the barn. I had to get the animals out first. I used a heavy-duty chain cutter on the lock, yanked the post hole digger through the handle, and wrenched the gate open, securing it that way. I walked into the dark pasture, called out to my boys, Thor, Loki, Odin. Dinner time, fellas. The three champion Angus, massive, black, and perpetually grumpy, lumbered over, expecting their evening grain. I led them out of the pasture and up the main driveway, clear path now leading not to their usual feeding trough, but toward the bright, noisy back entrance of the barn where the caterers were still shuffling trays. The caterers saw the bulls first and scattered, screaming, abandoning a $3 steer cake. I walked to the back door of the barn, a sliding $12-foot hay door I had left unlatched. I yanked it fully open. The bulls saw the commotion, the lights, the open space, and, most importantly, the sound of the band and the sight of a massive table covered in canapes and artisanal cheeses. They were curious, they were hungry, and they were agitated by the noise. I gave them a little swat on the hindquarters and whispered, "Go introduce yourselves, boys." They walked in. I slammed the $12-foot sliding door shut and secured it with the thick iron bar I kept by the door, just as I heard the first screams erupt from inside. I was standing outside, the owner of the property. But the perpetrators of the criminal act were now sealed inside with $7,500 pounds of distressed territorial livestock. The sounds of panic quickly replaced the music. I was entirely helpless, or so Brenda Thompson would later claim. I just stood and listened to the chaos I had unleashed. The sounds coming from the barn were instantly gratifying. Shattered glass, upturned tables, desperate shouts, and the deep, guttural bellows of three confused $2,500 pound animals. Thor, Loki, and Odin were not vicious. They were simply territorial bulls who, after a long day, found their home invaded and their routine interrupted. Their immediate goal was to find the quietest, darkest corner and maybe eat a floral arrangement. Their secondary goal, based on the caterer's screams, was the open food service area. The chaos, however, was 100% human-generated. The $22 remaining board members and key guests, having been sealed in, immediately tried to escape through the main front doors, only to realize the WMHOA had locked them from the inside with a deadbolt for security. They were trapped. I had my phone set to record, sitting on a hay bale across the driveway, capturing the $911 calls and the general mayhem. My lawyer's advice had been explicit. Do not touch them. Do not threaten them. Let the law and their own actions do the work. And I did. I waited exactly $15 minutes, the perfect amount of time for the bulls to demolish 2 dessert stations and for the board to realize the sheer terror of being confined with literal tons of muscle and horns. Only when I heard Brenda Thompson's signature, high-pitched scream of pure animalistic fear did I make my move. I walked up to the main side window where a $300-pound man was struggling to fit through the small opening. I calmly knocked on the glass. "Everything all right in there, folks?" I shouted over the din. The man stopped, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. "Jake, open the door. You're going to kill us. The animals are destroying everything," he shrieked. "Sir," I said, putting on my best concerned citizen voice, "I am standing on my private property. You are trespassing and have criminally barricaded yourselves inside a private building. Moreover, you've clearly distressed my prize breeding stock by seizing their home. I can't enter an active crime scene, but I can call the police and animal control to safely remove the criminals from my property." I pulled out my phone and dialed $911. "Yes, hello. I'm at the Iron R Ranch. I need police assistance. A group of trespassers has locked themselves inside my barn, and I believe my bulls have gotten out of their pasture and are now confined in the structure with them. They are in distress, and I am unable to safely enter to retrieve them." I clearly stated that they locked the doors, and I was outside. The police arrived $10 minutes later, followed by an emergency animal control unit. What they found was $22 terrified adults huddled on top of 3 $15 foot-tall stacks of hay bales. Their tuxedos and gowns ruined, while Thor was casually licking champagne off a demolished podium. Brenda Thompson was sobbing hysterically. I opened the main doors for the police, who immediately cited the entire group for criminal trespass, reckless endangerment, and felony breaking and entering due to the internal lock. My core victory was immediate. The entire board was escorted out in handcuffs looking like absolute fools, but the full resolution came when animal control confirmed the bulls were stressed but healthy, and that their aggression was simply territorial displacement caused by the party. The police report officially documented that the WMHOA had seized private property, locked themselves in, and their own actions were responsible for the panic and destruction. My lawyer filed a lawsuit $12 hours later, citing $15 counts, including the felony charge, and demanding $5 million in damages. The fallout was swift and total. The lawsuit's filing was a media spectacle, and the local news ran the $911 tapes I had discreetly provided to my lawyer. Hearing Brenda Thompson shriek, "The $2,500 pound beasts are trying to eat the canaps. God, they're heading for the caviar," came the stuff of local legend. The board members were released on bail, but the public humiliation was a far heavier sentence. The first immediate payback came in the form of a $250,000 preliminary injunction granted by the judge, forcing the WMHOA to post bond immediately to cover the cost of the destroyed barn interior and my lost hay supply, which they had to pay personally, as the WMHOA's insurance explicitly did not cover criminal acts of the board. The $22 board members were suspended from the HOA by an emergency vote of the community, terrified of being held liable for the $5 million lawsuit. Brenda Thompson, the architect of the whole disaster, was not only stripped of her presidency, but also personally handed a cease and desist order from my lawyer, forbidding her from being within $1,000 feet of my property line. The real, satisfying payback came from the community itself. Many of the WMHOA residents had been furious about Brenda's constant overreach. My lawyer, during the initial discovery, found documented evidence of Brenda illegally diverting HOA funds to a shell corporation run by her brother, which was meant to be for community beautification. This had nothing to do with me, but it was the final, devastating piece of public ammunition. I ensured the media got the unsealed documents. Within a week, the WMHOA itself sued the former board members for criminal misappropriation of funds and breach of fiduciary duty. Brenda Thompson and her cronies were now fighting a criminal investigation, $5 million civil suit from me, and a lawsuit from their own HOA. The community had turned on them, realizing that this was never about $1 for acre lots. It was about pure, narcissistic power. I watched Brenda's resignation video, which was tearful, self-pitying, and entirely unconvincing, and I poured myself a congratulatory bourbon. The immediate payback was watching their financial, legal, and social lives implode, all because they thought they could steal a barn from a rancher. The IRR was victorious, and my bulls were back to their quiet $2,500 pound snoozing. My original civil suit for $5 million ended up settling for a clean $1.80 million, paid out by the former board member's personal assets over $10 years, effectively bankrupting Brenda and several others. It wasn't about the money. It was about the financial and moral cost of their arrogance. The official court order included a permanent restraining order against all $22 former board members from ever setting foot on my property or within $500 feet of its perimeter. But the final nail in the coffin was a secondary, perfectly legal revenge move I'd been planning since I first drove home. The $1.80 million settlement included a provision that allowed me to purchase a small $2 acre lot of land that abutted the most expensive section of Whispering Meadows, right behind Brenda Thompson's $900,000 home, which she was now forced to sell. The land was part of the original ranch that had been sold off years ago. I bought it, then immediately filed a deed restriction with the county and the WMHOA that designated the land for agricultural purposes only. My final act of glorious spite was to erect a new, smaller pole barn on that $2 acre lot, right on Brenda's old property line. I filled it with $100 free range, extremely noisy, and perpetually hungry $30 pound Nigerian dwarf goats. Goats, unlike cows, are not quiet. They are demanding, they are loud, and they smell far more intensely than my bulls ever did. I christened the spot Thor's Victory Over Tyranny Goat Sanctuary. The new WMHOA board, traumatized and legally bound by the right to farm ordinance, couldn't touch me. The final, spectacular irony. The constant, high-pitched bleating of $100 goats drove down property values in that section of Whispering Meadows, forcing the quick sale of Brenda's house at a $200,000 loss. Her buyer, I later found out, was the second most annoying board member, who, ironically, was now stuck right next to the goat sanctuary. I sent them a housewarming gift, a $50 pound bag of goat feed, and a note that read, "Welcome to the country." The WMHOA never bothered me again. My bulls had a new layer of celebrity, and the IRR ranch was finally completely and permanently respected. What was the most shocking part of this nuclear revenge? Was it the moment Thor started licking the champagne or the glorious goat sanctuary finale? Let me know in the comments below. Do you want to forget to subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable stories of entitled homeowners getting what they deserve? And hit that notification bell so you never miss a dose of sweet, satisfying justice.